Imagine watching a cop knock your mother to the ground for nothing. Now imagine being the one man who could destroy his entire career. It was just another afternoon at Greenwood Plaza, the kind of place where people come to escape their daily routine. Bright lights, the scent of fresh pretzels drifting through the air, parents tugging at their kids to stay close, and teenagers laughing as they huddled near the food court. Among them was Elena James, 68 years old, soft-spoken but firm when it mattered. She wasn't there for anything special, just a quick stop at the J.C. Penney for a few things. A new sweater, some socks, and a small gift for her granddaughter. She walked slowly but purposefully, her gray curls peeking from under a knitted hat. A woman who had seen a lot in her time. But today she never expected to see her own name in the headlines. She had just stepped out of the store when heard it shouting loud, heated, coming from a few feet away at a checkout counter in Foot Locker. A young man, barely in his 20s, was arguing with the cashier. His voice was raised, his hands moving fast. As he tried to explain something, the employee, a girl who couldn't be older than 19, looked nervous. She kept glancing toward the security desk, shifting on her feet, like she wasn't sure what to do next. Miss James wasn't one to meddle in other people's business, but this felt different. She could hear the tension, the fear in the cashier's voice as she stammered through her words. The way the young man clenched his fists, not in a way that suggested violence, but frustration. She hesitated for a moment. Maybe she should keep walking. But then the cashier's voice broke as she whispered, "I don't want any trouble," was all it took. Miss James stepped forward. "Son, take a breath," she said, her voice gentle but steady. "Tell her what's wrong." The young man turned to her, surprised. His breathing was heavy, his face flushed. She thinks my card is fake. She won't run it again." The cashier quickly shook her head. "It's store policy. It declined once. I can't. I got the money," he snapped. "Why would I steal shoes?" Miss James looked at both of them. She understood both sides. The boy felt accused. The girl felt pressured. And now the mall security guard, a stocky man with a radio on his hip, was walking toward them. Miss James knew how quickly these situations could spiral. "You were both upset," she said, holding up a hand. "Let's just breathe for a second, all right?" The security guard stepped in. "What's the issue here?" And before anyone could answer, before Miss James could even turn, she heard another voice, louder, sharper, authoritative. Step away from the counter, officer. Daniels had arrived. But something about the way he looked at Miss James told her he wasn't here to listen, but she had no idea just how bad this was about to get. Officer Daniels wasn't just any cop. He was the cop, the one everyone knew for all the wrong reasons. A man with a reputation for being quick with his hands, and even quicker with his temper. The kind of officer who saw a situation, decided who the problem was within seconds, and never questioned himself after that. And today his eyes locked onto Miss James. "Ma'am," I said, "step away from the counter," he barked. Resting his hand near his belt, Miss James blinked, confused. "I was just trying to." Daniel stepped closer. "I gave you an order. Do I need to repeat myself?" The boy at the register looked between them. His hands now clenched at his sides. "She was just helping," he blurted. Daniels ignored him. "Last warning, lady, move." Miss James should have felt afraid, but she didn't. Maybe it was her age. Maybe it was everything she had seen in her lifetime, but she had long stopped letting men like this shake her. "I'm not interfering," she said, standing her ground. "I'm just making sure no one gets hurt over something small." Daniel's nostrils flared. He stepped even closer, towering over her. "I don't need a lecture. Back off now." The security guard, who had been silent until now, shifted uncomfortably. It was clear he wasn't sure if this was necessary. Miss James sighed, holding up her hands. All right. No need to be aggressive, officer." She turned to walk away, but Daniels, he wasn't done. "Stop right there," he snapped. She turned back, brows furrowing. "I'm leaving." Daniels shook his head. "Not so fast." He pulled out his notepad, flipping it open, like he was already preparing to write something down. "What's your name, Miss?" James frowned. "Why would you need that?" Daniels smirked. "Because I'm writing you up for interfering in an investigation." The crowd around them was growing. People were watching. Now phones were out. Whispers spread like wildfire. Miss James exhaled slowly. "Officer, I was just trying to calm things down." There was no Daniels. Cut her off. "Give me your ID, ma'am." Now something in his tone made it clear he was looking for a reason to escalate this. She didn't like where this was going. "I don't have to give you anything," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I didn't commit a crime." Daniel's face darkened. His hand twitched near his holster. But instead of his gun, he reached for his radio dispatch. He said, pressing the button, "I have a non-company. Compliant suspect at Foot Locker requesting backup." M. James stiffened. Suspect. People around them murmured in confusion. The young man at the counter took a step forward. "Man, what she didn't do anything." Daniels didn't even glance at him. His eyes were still locked on Miss James. "Last chance," he said, his voice lowering to something dangerous. "Give me your ID or I'll be forced to detain you." Miss James didn't move. A younger version of herself might have argued, might have tried to reason with him, but she knew his type, so she reached for her purse. Slow, deliberate. Her fingers brushed against her wallet, and then Daniel shoved her a hard, forceful push to her shoulder. She stumbled back, catching herself against the edge of a clothing rack. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Someone shouted, Yo, what the hell, miss?" James clutched her arm, eyes wide. Daniels was breathing heavier now, like a man ready for a fight. His hand twitched again, closer to his cuffs. This time the mall felt still, like everyone was waiting for what would happen next. And then Miss James lifted her chin. "I have done nothing wrong," she said, her voice unwavering. Daniels snapped, but no one unexpected what he did next. The air inside the mall had shifted. People weren't just watching anymore. They were waiting to see if this was going to be another one of those stories. The kind you read about, the kind you see in shaky phone footage that gets millions of views, for all the wrong reasons. And Officer Daniels, he didn't disappoint. His patience snapped like a rubber band, stretched too thin. His hand shot forward fast, a blur of movement, and then crack. His fist connected with M. James's face. A sickening sound echoed through the store. She stumbled. Ed backward legs, giving out beneath her. The world around her spun as her body hit the cold tile floor. Gasps, screams. A woman yelled, "Oh my God." A man's voice cut through the chaos. "Did he just punch her?" Miss James lay there, her cheek burning, her vision blurred. She touched her face, feeling the sting of raw skin. Her glasses knocked off to the side, but she barely had time to process what just happened because Daniels was on her knees on the ground, hands grabbing at her arms. "Stop resisting," he barked, resisting. She wasn't resisting, she was barely conscious. But that didn't stop him. A knee pressed against her back, the weight of him crushing her small frame. The crowd wasn't just watching anymore. They were yelling. A man stepped forward, phone in his hand. "Get off her." A woman was crying, "Sheck, an old lady. What are you doing?" The boy from the register, his face red with anger, tried to move closer. "Man, what the hell is wrong with you?" Daniels didn't care. His hand gripped Miss James's wrist, twisting it behind her back. He reached for his cuffs, ready to make an example out of her. And that's when it happened. A voice, deep, commanding, unmistakable. "Get your hands off my mother." And just like that, the entire energy in the room changed. The moment that voice cut through the chaos, everything froze. Officer Daniels's grip loosened for just a second, the weight of his knees still pressing into Miss James's back. But now his face changed. It was the first sign of hesitation he had shown since this whole thing started. Like something inside him had just clicked, but he wasn't ready to acknowledge it. Yet the crowd parted like water making way for a storm, and there he was, Malcolm James, tall, broad shoulders, a suit that looked like it cost more than Daniel's entire paycheck. He wasn't just a man, he was a presence, and behind him 2 other men just as sharply dressed, their faces cold and unreadable. Daniels didn't know them, but the way the crowd suddenly shifted, the way the whispers turned into recognition, told him they did, and that was the second time fear crept into Daniel's face. But Malcolm, he wasn't looking at him, he was looking at his mother, lying on the ground, face bruised, struggling to breathe under the weight of a man who had no business touching her. His jaw tightened. I said, "Get your hands off my mother." Daniels blinked, snapping back into his arrogance. He hated being challenged, hated feeling like he wasn't in control. She resisted arrest. He spat, gripping Miss James's wrist, tighter, trying to prove a point. Malcolm took another step forward, and that's when Daniels realized just how tall he was. But Malcolm didn't shout, he didn't need to. His voice was low, firm, and laced with the kind of power that made men like Daniels nervous. "Let her go." Daniels hesitated, and in that moment, one of the men behind Malcolm spoke for the first time. "This is the part where you stop digging your own grave, officer." Daniels turned to him. The man pulled out a badge, DOJ Civil Rights Division. Daniels' stomach dropped, and suddenly, this wasn't just a bad moment caught on camera. This was about to be a career-ending mistake, but the damage was already done. Officer Daniels' breath hitched, but he tried to hide it. His grip on Miss James's wrist loosened, but not enough. His pride wouldn't let him back down so easily. He looked between Malcolm and the badge flashing in his face. His brain was scrambling, calculating. Could he talk his way out of this? Could he spin it? But Malcolm, he was done waiting. He crouched beside his mother, ignoring Daniels like he didn't even exist. "Mom," he said softly, his voice a stark contrast to the fury simmering in his eyes. "Are you okay, Miss James?" Winced, her cheek already starting to swell. Her body trembled not just from pain, but from the sheer weight of what had just happened. "I'm okay, baby," she whispered, though everyone could see she wasn't. Malcolm's jaw clenched. His hands tightened into fists. But he didn't lash out. He didn't need to. Because the DOJ official standing behind him wasn't playing games. "Officer Daniels," the man said, his voice steady step away from her. Now Daniels finally let go. His knee lifted off Miss James's back, and for the first time she could breathe. Malcolm helped her sit up. The entire mall was dead silent. Daniel stood there, his mind racing. He could feel the eyes on him, the cameras, the weight of what he had just done. And then his partner, Officer Blake, who had been standing nearby watching this unfold in stunned silence, finally stepped forward. "Daniels," she muttered, her voice tight with disbelief. "What the hell did you just do?" Daniels glared at her, as if daring her to challenge him. But she wasn't backing him up this time, because even she knew this wasn't defendable. One of the DOJ officials turned to Malcolm. "We saw everything he said, and we already contacted internal affairs. Your mother's going to get justice." Daniels' stomach sank. His entire career flashed before his eyes, the lawsuits, the investigations. The fact that his face was now all over social media, but it wasn't over yet, because Malcolm calculated. Malcolm slowly stood up, and then H.E. spoke. "Justice. Oh no, this isn't just about justice. This is about making sure he never does this to anyone else again." Daniels knew in that moment his life was never going to be the same. But what happened next? That's what sealed his fate. The weight of Malcolm's words settled over the mall like a storm cloud. Daniel's face drained of color. His hands twitched at his sides, but for once he had nothing to say. The crowd, they weren't at letting this go. Phones were still up. People were live streaming. News outlets were already being tagged. This wasn't just a bad day for Daniels. This was the end of him. Miss James was finally helped to her feet, her body unsteady, but her gaze strong. She had survived Jim Crow redlining marches where she had been spit on for simply existing. She had survived worse than men like Daniels, and now the entire country was about to see exactly who he was. Malcolm kept his eyes locked on the officer. "You thought she was just another old black woman you could intimidate," he said, his voice calm but sharp enough to cut. "You didn't think twice before putting your hands on her because you've gotten away with this before." Daniel's throat bobbed, but still he stayed silent. Malcolm took a step closer. "But this time you picked the wrong one. This time you were caught." The DOJ official turned to the second officer. "Officer Blake, you need to take his badge now." Blake hesitated. She had known Daniels for years. They had worked together, shared shifts, grabbed coffee between calls. But as she looked at him, now she didn't see a cop. She saw a coward without a word. She reached out and unclipped his badge. Daniels flinched as if the metal had been ripped from his skin. It was over the mall security escorted him away, not in handcuffs, but it didn't matter, because this was only the beginning of his downfall. By the time Miss James was in an ambulance, her son beside her, the video was everywhere. CNN, MSNBC, Twitter, Facebook. Racist cop attacks elderly black woman in mall. Her son's response leaves him speechless. The mayor released a statement within hours. Officer Daniels has been placed on unpaid leave pending a full investigation, but people knew what that meant. It meant they were scrambling, trying to control the damage. Too late. The country had already decided. Within 48 hours, the police department issued a press release. Daniels fired. But Malcolm, he wasn't done firing him. Isn't enough. He told reporters he needs to face charges, and with the DOJ involved, it was only a matter of time. Miss James sat in her hospital, little bed, bruises fading, but her spirit unshaken. She looked at her son. "You didn't have to do all that, baby," she whispered. Malcolm shook his head. "Ma, I did what any son would do." She smiled, squeezing his hand. "No, son, you did what every person should do. Stand up, speak out, never stay silent, because silence, that's how they get away with it." How many times have we seen this happen? How many times have we watched the same story play out? It's time to demand more, speak up, record share, hold them accountable. Because if we don't, who will?